Welcome back to Common Sense, Rhode Island. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and I have with me today Michael Riley, who is a very smart man when it comes to financial advice and
Thank you. I don't know.
And knowledge. We were talking about the state's pension fund, and you were mentioning the hedge funds, and that you thought they were the wrong ones. Not that hedge funds are necessarily bad, but the ones that were chosen are bad. And I just wonder for the folks if you could explain that and what would have been maybe better choices.
So there are two major factors regarding whether you want to choose a private investment, whether it be a private equity investment or a hedge fund. To me, they're both pooled investment vehicles of which a group of people manage the money and charge whoever's giving them the money some sort of fee.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with hedge funds is the idea of 2 and 20, which means the hedge fund manager charges you 2% a year just to manage the fees and takes 20% of any profits.
Okay.
Okay, so that means it's very expensive. They better be very good. So in theory...
Yeah, if they're making 200%, you don't mind them taking
Right.
something, but if they're not making...
Right. So generally speaking, Warren Buffett would say, and I would say, you don't want to invest in these hedge funds for pension funds because the likelihood over a period of time that those costs will be surpassed by the performance and the risk it's just very unlikely. So why would you even be involved in that? And so first attacks have been brought on by various groups about the hedge fund space because a lot of the hedge fund managers believe in taking defined benefit plans into defined contribution plans against their own interests, by the way. So so when people are looking at pension plans like CalPERS and CalSTRS and they kick out all the hedge funds, the reasoning is, well, we're going to save all this amount of money in fees that we're paying to hedge fund managers. And we'll replace it with investments that we know about and we think we can replicate the returns. The fact of the matter is hedge funds have performed very poorly. But not all hedge funds have performed as poorly as some of the ones we've chosen here in Rhode Island. And so you would have thought that if Raimondo was particularly in favor of this hedge fund piece of the portfolio, it would have been because she was a venture capitalist, and I won't go into the ethics of what she did and kept her investment, but the hedge funds themselves, she should have had some insight into or some reasoning behind the idea of adding the hedge. Right.
Yeah.
And they've turned out to be not great choices. For example,
well, not good for Rhode Islanders, and I'm just going to stop you a little bit because we did want to talk about some other things, but one of the consequences for taxpayers in Rhode Island that I see because I'm on the finance committee is that the annual required contribution is growing.
Right.
And that's money that taxpayers give into the pension fund. If the pension fund is growing, it's a smaller amount. But since it's going down, it's a larger amount. And it's going to crowd out other spending.
So this goes back to what we were talking about before. When we look at the funded ratio, and we see that the pension fund is roughly 57% funded right now, the actuaries will go back and they'll say, okay, you only have this many assets, you have this liability, therefore each year you're going to have to contribute at least a number.
Sure.
And that's called the annual required contribution.
Yeah, we call it the ARC. That's right, ARC.
Right. So that's a number that is calculated by an actuary, but it's based partially in the current facts. So states...
It's the math.
It's the math, but states and municipalities know it's the math, and so if they want to fudge that ARC number so they don't have to come up with it at budget time, they keep an unrealistically high expected rate of return.
The 7.5 is unrealistic.
Right.
But that keeps them from having to put so much money into the pension.
Exactly. That's been the problem for 20 years now.
But even so, leaving it at 7.5%, not increasing it or anything, right now, because the pension fund is going down, we actually have to pay more every year.
So
and that does crowd other spending or tax relief.
Yeah.
It just does.
And don't think that, okay, so we have a $500 million shortfall roughly this year. That doesn't mean you have to come up with $500 million.
No.
That's amortized over a period of years. And so you might have to come up with 20 million more or 30 million.
Yeah, I wish I could remember, I just know that it's more.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears a
Can
little
I
bit.
give you one more thing?
Sure, you can give me one more thing.
Because it just drives me nuts. In the February and the August crisis, if you are following the markets at all,
Yes,
it was very ugly. And our hedge funds were supposed to be the investments that would counterweight
That's
what was
right.
going on in the rest of it. But yet, we had two hedge funds that were investing in junk bonds and energy junk bonds in the middle of this huge decline. They were exacerbating the downturn. So these hedge funds were doing anything but hedging. So why were those part of a portfolio that's supposed to counterbalance what the rest of the portfolio does? I think they picked the
bad
wrong
choices.
hedge funds.
Bad
Yeah.
choices.
Yeah.
You're right, energy bonds for the folks means all of the natural gas companies, the people who are trying to supply those.
Yeah.
They borrowed a lot of money. And when the price of oil went down,
We became
They
more
went down with
exposed
it.
than we should have been.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so bad for taxpayers.
Just bad.
The choices were bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, is that it? Because
Well-
we'll switch, all right, you have one more thing.
No, well, I just want to point out that the state is not in a good condition with its current funded ratio. It is making its current ARC payment, and that will likely go up. I don't know what the mechanism is in the state for when they make that decision and for how long they make that decision. As far as the accounting rules are concerned, they're getting rid of the term ARC altogether, just so that you know, because they're trying to move what are now called soft debt, like pension fund debt, to hard debt. They're trying to put it on the balance sheets
Yeah.
of every city, town,
Well-
and state, and that's the new GASB 68 that's making them recognize that.
Yeah, and that's actually better for everybody.
Yes.
Because like you say, politicians have promised things because they know they're not going to be there when it has to be paid off.
And that's the happy, funny version. The sad, terrible, immoral version is that we have children and grandchildren who are shoving our debts onto them, and we're doing it knowingly.
And that people have made plans relying on those promises
The
as
people
well.
that, who are the beneficiaries, yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Right, everybody hurts.
They were promised, but, you know, our kids, we kind of promised we're going to bring up our kids in a solvent society. We're not going to if we continue to do this.
No, we're not. So not good news for the state's taxpayers because the pension fund is not performing anywhere close to what it should be.
Yeah, it would help state taxpayers, for example, if we outperformed our expectations
Oh,
over
yeah.
a period of time. But there's no, in my opinion, no likelihood of that.
Okay, you know what? With that sobering thing in mind, sobering statement, we're just going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we'll have another topic.
Okay.
Okay?